Sadness is not evidence you're failing at life. It's evidence that you're alive in the first place.
What role does contrast play in happiness?
Mountains only exist because you have valleys. Light only exists because you have dark. Joy only registers as pleasure because you've just experienced some sort of pain. There's never been a better time or place to be alive. And yet, in all sorts of ways, we have never been more miserable. Wealth and comfort and safety are extraordinary luxuries, but they're also a burden in the sense that they sort of give us time to reflect on, what the fuck is all this for?
Good morning, Eamon. How are you, mate?
Good morning to you, sir.
People listen to these podcasts. I mean, I've been running this podcast for 12 years now, and people listen to stuff from 2013. People listen to stuff from years ago. And so I always think it's important to put a little timestamp on where we are. So I might ask you to do this, considering you're the one who's far better at summing up moments of Australian culture than me. If you were to put a timestamp on this day, which is the 16th of December, 2025, what would you put on this day? What's going on in the country right now?
I think what's going on in the country right now is much the same as what's going on in the Western world right now, which is sort of a deep and profound weirdness. We're living at a time that's wildly out of step with like 99.9% of human existence when it comes to what we expect from life and what we expect from ourselves. And the key point now is happiness. I mean, that happiness is achievable. We pursue it and we believe that it can be caught. And expectation is sort of wildly out of step with 99% of human existence. Cavemen didn't get up in the morning sort of expecting the world to cater to their emotional needs. They, if they got through the day without coughing up blood, on the whole, they were doing just fine. And I think that is a thought worth keeping in mind. And it's a thought that I've explored in my book.
We're recording this 2 days after the terrorist attack in Bondi Beach. Would you say it's in moments like this that we are confronted with the question of what it means to be Australian?
Personally, I feel Australianness is sort of overstated, sort of for good and for ill. But yeah, I would certainly like to believe that Australia is a better and safer and kinder and more understanding place than sort of what we have seen recently. And I think that by and large, we are living in a time and a place that is healthier and wealthier and more accepting of difference than any other time or place in history. I think, as hard as life can be and is for all sorts of minorities and all sorts of people, in many ways, it's a better time than ever before, and I think that is worth keeping in mind. But though that's obviously certainly not a reason to not continue to get better still and make sure everyone is safe and everyone is heard and everyone is accepted and loved.
The feeling in my body, thinking about what's been happening less than 2 kilometres from where I'm sitting, it's still hanging around. I also know Australia is still a safer country than it was last week.
Yeah.
Things are bad, but they're getting better. But that's a hard thing to comprehend, because I want this feeling in my body to have a reason to be there. And if you and I sit here on this podcast and say things are better now than they ever have been, even with all this shit, that doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit at all. If I can be slightly less highbrow and quote Richard Curtis, the writer of Love Actually and Four Weddings and so on, he's often sort of attacked for being, borderline smug, but, bottom line, not realistic. But the romantic comedies, they don't portray like the grit and the grime and, the gritty urban realism and the guns and the drugs. They portray sort of, middle-class people being middle-class and loving each other. And he was sort of saying, well, people attack me for not sort of presenting realism, but if you think about it, that sort of is realism. I mean, the average Westerner, at the very least, is more likely to sort of receive a hug and an I love you in the course of their week than they are to, receive a bullet wound. Like you go to the airport and see sort of people coming home and being embraced by their relatives. Like the world is sort of full of love and good things, and it's important to sort of keep them in mind at times like this, when obviously you're reminded that the world is also full of horrendous things and sort of hatred and anger and so on. And yeah, life is a balancing act. I mean, in the time that we've started, since in the 5 minutes we've been talking, Osha, sort of dozens of people have been sort of diagnosed with terminal illnesses or starved to death in a gutter or something like that. And you could exist in a world where you sort of feel for all of them at all times, but you could not possibly function in this in that world. And so, on some
Yeah.
level, you do have to focus on the fact that the world is full of happy people too, and getting that balance right and that formula right is the task of a lifetime, and no one ever quite nails it.
When I've been through periods of catastrophic depression, Eamon,
Mm.
that involved quite serious pharmaceutical intervention and some very hardworking, very clever doctors who helped me a lot. But I know what it feels like to have a doom filter on every single input:
Mm.
visual, auditory, touch, smell. It's stifling. It's
Mhm.
impossible. And one of the things I remember having to comprehend was, right now, even this feel of destruction and doom, and the sky is falling and the world is closing on me like a trash compactor in Star Wars, somewhere there is a basket full of Labrador puppies.
Mhm.
Somewhere. As you mentioned, yes, there's people starving in the gutter and but like in the 8 minutes that we've been talking, babies have been born. People have
Absolutely.
had the greatest day of their lives. You mentioned it in the book, which I think is interesting, this idea, oh, happiness is a thing we can get and never have to let go of. That is a very dangerous idea that we've been sold, particularly happiness is a thing that we can get and never let go of if you buy this big TV.
The idea that happiness is a commodity or a project or a KPI, just the idea that it is a thing that can be achieved so long as you get the right job or marry the right person or think the right thoughts or follow the right program. This is a strange idea and very modern idea that does essentially have its roots in capitalism and advertising. 100 years ago, it would never have occurred to anyone that happiness would be theirs if they just got a fancy new suit or a sparkling new sort of penny farthing. But advertisers sort of beat that sort of idea sort of into all of us. And on some level, we've all accepted it to this day. Even if you sort of reject the sort of consumerist trappings of life, even if you say, oh, no, I have no interest in a gold watch, you still have drunk the basic Kool-Aid, which is the idea that happiness can be achieved so long as you do the right thing. Happiness is a place that one can travel to with the right map. And happiness doesn't work that way. And trying to achieve permanent happiness is like trying to sort of nail jelly to a wall. It's just it's a futile enterprise.
You're right about this wonderfully when you talk about the idea of contrast. If I've eaten, like last night, my wife's an amazing cook. She can create these unbelievable curries full of legumes and flavor and stuff. And I can eat to a point where if I put one more bite in me, my stomach will go, no, and just I'll puke it up. I can't have any more. All right. I need to feel hungry to enjoy this food. But then I also have to let this food be in me for a while if I want to feel hungry again to enjoy this food. Contrast is such an important part of us in our life, in anything. What role does contrast play in happiness?
I mean, imagine you've grown up in Antarctica. You've never seen a jumper. You've never seen a fire. You've never huddled around a Dimplex. Essentially, you've been freezing from the word go, and chances are you'll freeze to death pretty soon. Now, imagine being asked to define the word hot. You don't know what that is. The brain only understands things through opposites. You can only sort of understand what light is because you have darkness. Mountains only exist because you have valleys. And sort of emotions work the same way. It's like joy only registers as pleasure because you've just experienced some sort of pain. Champagne is glorious if you've, been drinking cask wine. But if you have champagne every day, if you have even your wife's glorious curry every day, it soon starts to get a bit boring. It soon starts to get a bit sort of blah. Our brain is designed to want what we don't have and to sort of normalize what we do. The extraordinary will quickly become ordinary. You get incredibly sexy, exciting new partner, and then you look at how she stacks the dishwasher, and you you get annoyed. But essentially, success doesn't satisfy. It just sort of moves the goalposts. Like, Brad Pitt is the world's biggest movie star, but he probably lies awake at night thinking about, all the Oscars he hasn't won. This is why sort of billionaires work sort of 20-hour days. It's because enough is never enough, and enough can't be enough.
Dopamine plays a huge role in all of this. It is colloquially known as the molecule of more. Anything that is basically out of your reach, dopamine is involved in you getting it. And what you mentioned before, it's called hedonic habituation. That is, all these things exist evolutionarily.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are wired to be in a state of discomfort when we don't have enough, because until farming, we never had enough. And our day was going to get enough to survive. But it's hard to accept, though. Here we are. We've invented, I don't know, fridge magnets. We've fucking invented fridges. We can do anything. We're humans. No, we're animals designed for an environment of scarcity. And when we're put in an environment of abundance, we now need a mobility scooter.
We're descended from sort of twitchy, anxious, neurotic sort of striders. We're descended from the people who didn't stop to smell the roses. We're descended from the people who checked that the rose bushes weren't hiding a wolf. There were probably sort of humans who gazed at the sunset and contemplated sort of the magic of existence, but they weren't the ones storing food. They weren't the ones migrating ahead of a glacier, and they certainly weren't the ones sort of surviving long enough to reproduce our ancestors. And yeah, it's a tough sort of pill to swallow, but like in evolutionary, nature does not want us to be happy. Nature wants us to survive.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. So what do we do about it, Eamon? I'm sure, the last time you bought a new car, you were thrilled. Hey, I've got this new car. It gets me where I want to go. It's reliable. It doesn't break down. It's far more efficient. I can take all my shit everywhere. What did you do when your shiny new car now just became a metal box with cup holders? Like, how do we get around that?
I mean, I'm not sort of suggesting that people don't have goals. I think it's just we don't suffer from wanting a new car. We suffer from the idea that a new car will make us happy, and there is something wrong if it doesn't. We suffer from the idea that misery is a problem to be fixed, a glitch to be solved. It's a sign that the machine is breaking down in some way. Misery is not a flaw in the machine. Misery is part of the machine. It's a vital cog. It's having these lows is what leads to great highs. Misery is, and disappointment and anxiety and fear and so on and so forth. These can give sort of, color and texture and sort of depth to life. There's all sorts of wonderful things that sort of come with being miserable. Misery, and I distinguish misery from sort of mental illness, depression, just like ordinary, everyday sort of misery it's like the rain. No one likes the rain. No one wants the rain. We don't blame ourselves for the rain. We don't blame our friends or our job or our partner for the rain. We don't yell at the sky. We don't try and throw rain back into the sky. We just sort of grab an umbrella and get on with our day. I think that's sort of how we need to treat a lot of the flat periods or the bad periods in our life. And misery has all sorts of beautiful fruits. Misery makes you kinder. Misery makes you sort of sharper. Misery makes you more sort of appreciative. A smooth sort of blemish-free life tends to produce a fairly dull human being. And who really wants to be one of them?
I made a documentary about pain, chronic and persistent pain, and we talked a bit about our relationship to pain and what we're taught as a kid about this sensation. We brought up to fear this sensation, yet it is a very important sensation because without the absence of pain or discomfort, there is no comfort. We did this whole test with a psychologist. It involved an ice bath and a chili. It was exciting. What would you say to people about what to do with these feelings of misery and how they might frame them and what they might use them for?
The happiest people are people who see their down periods as useful and temporary. Like, you've just had a kid, you've got kids, I hear, I've got kids, and you say to people, I don't care if they're an architect or an accountant or a rock star or whatever, I just want them to be happy. Because if you just wanted them to be happy, you could hook your newborn baby up to a little sort of heroin drip, so they're stuck there their whole life in this wriggling, ecstatic state of bliss, never truly opening their eyes, never learning to walk or talk or going out there into the world, but having floods of dopamine and serotonin and whatever else coursing through their system. That is theoretically possible, but that is clearly not something anyone would want for their kid. That is clearly the stuff of a horror film. Yes, they would never be bullied. They would never get pimples. They would never get detention. They would never go through all the things that we all find painful. They wouldn't really be living at all. What you want is a full life. What you want is a rich life. What you want is a life that has texture and meaning. Like, who wants to see a movie where people start out happy and then they remain happy and then at the end of the movie they're happy? There's no way to fend off misery. It's going to find you come what may, because, sadness is not sort of evidence you're failing at life. It's evidence that you're alive in the first place. Just sort of do your best to, embrace it.
You mentioned parenting in your book.
Yeah.
If your child isn't smiling, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And you also write that if your child isn't always happy, that there's evidence that somewhere someone parented them wrong.
Yeah.
As a parent, when your child isn't smiling, it's not fun. How do you handle those moments?
I preach a lot more than I practice these things. I think a child who was permanently loving everything would grow up to be a child that, a bit like, Uday Hussein or Kim Jong-un, just sort of that child that, was sort of slightly sociopathic. I mean, we need, like, pain and suffering are a teacher. They help us to relate to others.
Kim Jong-un once played a round of golf and he scored a hole-in-one 18 times in a row.
That's true. Well, yeah,
that's solid.
He is the exception to a cast iron rule.
That's pretty good stuff.
Yes, I'm sorry. I shouldn't wrong the great man. Well, he did have a model parent as well. So,
and you see it sometimes. You see it with other parents, and I understand it. You want them to have what they need. You want them to be, particularly if you had a hard upbringing, you want them to have the things you never had. But what kind of adult does that turn them into? But it is a part of making sure they become a good adult.
Well, yeah. I mean, I look at people like sort of Caligula and Nero who were basically, like, literally treated as living gods, from the moment of birth. And I think it's fair to say they didn't turn out well. I think it's good for a child to be miserable sometimes, just as it's good for us. Without that, there's a solid chance you'll be a sociopath. You won't be appreciative. Like, if you never have to earn a bit of pocket money, you'll never appreciate a fancy meal. If you don't, if you've never been rejected, you won't sort of appreciate what it is to finally end up with a good partner. You can't sort of numb sadness without numbing joy, I think, is the fundamental message of my book, and I want my sort of my children to be joyful. I mean, there's a famous Socrates quote. No, actually, John Stuart Mill quote, but it's better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. It's better to have a full and rich life with high highs and low lows and twists and turns and booby traps than it is to just sort of sit in the field chewing cud and sort of gazing blankly at a fence.
So when these feelings show up, we never see any of that messaging of what to do with the lull. What would you say? Like, what do you say to your kids when they have that feeling, when they have the disappointment? We didn't win the game. I didn't get the thing I wanted for Christmas.
I think I just thump the message home. I mean, not winning the game is a good one, really, because I mean, my kids, my boy is like a very enthusiastic Hawthorn supporter. I think you're up in Sydney, aren't you? Hawthorn,
yes, we are.
Yeah, AFL team that has historically been sort of stupidly good. I've seen something like 12 premierships in my lifetime, and that gets slightly dull. It's if you win premiership after premiership, if your football team wins every week, you don't continue to love football. You start to take an interest in golf. I remember the Australian cricket team was just obnoxiously good throughout the 90s, and I lost all interest in cricket because I couldn't bring myself to support the other team, but nor did I truly care if these guys just, won their 12th Ashes or something. And it all became sort of meaningless. And again, that is what I tell my kids. It's in order to have uptimes. I mean, constant fun would not be fun. Constant joy would not be joyful. Constant excitement would not be exciting. It's all part of the rich tapestry. So many threads, Osher.
What role, what would you say to people about humility and why it's important to embrace humility?
Knowing that Elon Musk and Brad Pitt and Donald Trump and Taylor Swift are lying awake at night, fretting about their failures and their inadequacies and so on, just as much as you are, is a healthy thing to keep in mind. It's basically, it doesn't vastly matter how good or bad you might be at any given thing. It doesn't really matter how successful or sort of dismally unsuccessful you might be in any area of life. You're still going to feel the same basic range of emotions, and a lot of those emotions are going to be fairly sort of self-lacerating. I don't feel particularly better than anyone. I don't feel really worse than anyone, because I think that all humans are pretty sort of similar, and all humans are sort of prey to fear, worry, insecurity, anxiety, dread, stress, and I never sort of imagined for a moment that anyone I'm talking to, however sort of, chiseled their cheekbones and strong their jawline, looking at you here, Osher, and, successful they have been in their life, I wouldn't cross my mind for a moment that you're not fretting about XYZ just as intensely as I might be, or Joe Bloggs next door.
At what point were you in your career? Because you're right about the hedonic treadmill,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a system that has lifted communities all over the world out of the kind of, not necessarily cavemans we spoke about earlier, but kind of poverty and life expectancy and very limited opportunities in life. Capitalism isn't all bad. It's not all good, but it has done a lot for helping a lot more people have a much better, more wonderfully fulfilling, healthy, long life where they can contribute meaningfully to others. And a lot of innovation as well as all of the very rich people that possibly are taking everything. So there's also that. But part of this system is useful for our community, but part of this system is a bit detrimental in that it does set this up. It does set up this, what we've come to now see in Australia. It's a broken promise of, you do this thing at school, then perhaps you do this thing at uni, or you go do this thing at work. You do it for long enough, you get to buy one of these things, you get to live in it, and at the end of it, you get to sell it, and you get to then just chill and play golf for 20 years. That is not true anymore. It was for this wonderful generation that got the use of it, like fucking amazing. What a dream. But it's not true right now. Where were you in your journey from school to now, where you kind of realized this might not be what you'd been promised?
I mean, full disclosure, I think I was a fairly pampered kid, like, solid upper middle class. And so I was never sort of as angsty about that sort of stuff in a sort of, lamentably sort of smug way. But I'm not driving a Ferrari these days. The life of a writer is not great. But I mean, I don't really waste time. Well, not waste time. I don't think about that a lot, because the thought that sort of guides me is that average working class sort of Australian today is living a life that, Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, Henry VIII could never have dreamed of. Like, we have, sushi, internet, sort of vacuum cleaners,
Collar of free water in a
air
tap.
fryers. We have penicillin. We have planes, trains, and automobiles. I mean, it's extraordinary. And yet we feel poor because we're not as wealthy as someone, with a 3-bedroom house living in, and who's paid off their mortgage. And yes, of course that is true, but all of us in Australia are basically in the top 99.9% of humans that have ever lived when it comes to sort of wealth and comfort and luxury and safety. And, and if you're gay or black or mentally ill or a woman, or disabled, there's never, yes, life is still hideous in all sorts of ways that I would not downplay for a second, but there's never been a better time or place to be alive, probably. We've never had more reason, quote unquote, to be happy. And yet, from a material point of view, and we've never been more focused on the project of being happy. And yet, in all sorts of ways, we have never been more miserable. And I think wealth and comfort and safety are extraordinary luxuries, but they're also a burden in the sense that they sort of give us time to reflect on, what the fuck is all this for? You don't remember that scene in sort of Castaway, or when Tom Hanks is like contemplating the meaning of life, or the scene in, The Revenant where Leonardo's just been attacked by a bear and he's crawling through the wilderness and he's like, what is the meaning of life? Like, these scenes weren't filmed because people were focused on that, focused on survival. And I wouldn't want to be in that film. I'm quite happy sitting at my comfy desk. But it's not to say that everything's rosy on this comfy desk, because Leonardo's life had a meaning. It was to get through the day without coughing up blood. How am I going to get through my day? I couldn't tell you, Osher.
Generally, the answer is more caffeine. That's usually it.
Yeah. So I just think that that's a thing to keep in mind, to not get fixated on the material things, because, if I was to pay off my mortgage tomorrow, it's not like the part of my brain that worries about my mortgage would just disappear and be replaced with contentment and joy. No, that part of my brain would just worry about something else. We can get fixated about the things that are making us miserable, and we very much ought to in all sorts of ways. And that sounds like a grim thought. It can actually become a comforting one, because it can give your life a certain sort of perspective, and it can give you a sense of control over things.
Yeah, this is the thing that I was going to mention just then, is that it is an evolutionary thing that our sense of time shrinks, and these things that we feel bad, we feel this is how it's always going to be now until the end of time. And we can end up making reactionary choices that possibly don't actually solve a problem, might make it worse, and possibly don't serve us or the people around us. So in my experience, it's important in those moments, yes, feel it, but also recognize that just as quickly as the happiness left you the moment you handed the slide back to the bloke at Wet n Wild after you'd done the big thing, this will leave too.
Yeah,
it feels a bit shit right now, but it will go.
Yeah, I mean, there are two things you shouldn't do. One is sort of, get fixated on your misery, sort of become like sort of Miss Havisham in Great Expectations, and she was like ditched at the altar, and she spent the rest of her life in her wedding dress, sort of sitting by her banquet, sort of wedding banquet, sort of weeping. Don't fixate on the misery and, associate it with certain sort of things in your life and so on. But also don't ignore it. Don't push it aside, because don't pretend it doesn't exist. Don't walk around in the rain without an umbrella. There's the classic sort of the white bear experiment, where sort of scientists encouraged a bunch of people to spend 5 minutes not thinking about white bears. Your misery, if you push it down, it's just going to sort of fester. It's just going to surface in some distorted form. Don't ignore it. Just treat it as a sort of a slightly annoying neighbor who's popped by for a chat. Have a chat, be polite, and then get on with your day.
Like, you just let him talk. I'm just going to, you sit there and tell me about how bad it was. I'm just going to keep cleaning the kitchen.
Yeah.
You've been a student of, and a great, scribe, I guess, of Australia and our culture, and, great moments and great places, Mount Buggery being one of them, for a long time now. What kind of Australia do you feel that we're moving towards, the kind of Australia that you want your kids to grow up in?
I feel that society and Australia has gotten better in the time that I've been alive. I mean, the sort of the casual racism, the casual homophobia, the sexism that sort of, I remember from when I was a kid, it's just not a thing anymore, at least in my sort of, ivory tower.
I hate to break it to you, mate, but Mahatma coach's still out doing corporate gigs.
Yeah, I'm sure, but it's not a sort of publicly celebrated sort of thing. I think, I mean, I'm quite positive. I believe in progress. I believe that the world is becoming a better place. I believe that, nostalgia is a seductive liar. Like, we're all sort of programmed to believe that the world used to be a better place, that, there was a time when politicians were pure and music was more soulful and communities really cared and celebrities had class and children were polite and life just made sense. And, I don't think that's true. I think if you look through, you will always find, you'll find ancient Romans complaining about the youth of today. Every generation for thousands of years has banged on about, migrants and, whatever else. It's just, and how they bring crime, and it's just, and then things sort themselves out. And so, yeah, I think Australia right now is as good as it's ever been. I worry that from a political point of view, I worry that government is getting smaller and the free market is getting bigger. I want more investment in education and welfare, and I don't fear the phrase nanny state. I think we could all do with a nice nanny. A bit of sort of economic, your occasional sort of Peter Dutton and Tony Abbott and Pauline Hanson aside, I think we're sort of broadly on a fairly positive track. I mean, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm oozing white male smugness as I say this, and I'm very conscious of that.
And if we ended up qualifying everything, we'd never get anything said. And
correct.
I'm taking you on good faith that, as you mentioned earlier, you are well aware that your life exists in a level of, excellence that many others don't. Yet it is not at many others' level. You are speaking of your experience, which is as valid as anybody else's. it's not to say because your experience exists, no other experience therefore exists. I'm not accusing you of this in any way, shape, or form. I'm taking you on a good faith person who understands that the world that you experience is not the same for everybody, even in this very country. And overall, what you have seen in your lifetime in this country, things are better.
This book, in a nutshell, is a call for perspective. It's not a call to say that the world is perfect. It's not a call to sort of rest on our laurels in any way, shape, or form. And it's certainly not a call to not pursue happiness and justice and understanding and peace and love for all humankind, because I absolutely believe in those things. It's good to appreciate where you are, and it's good to appreciate where you've come from. And I'd much rather be a random person in Australia today than a sort of a medieval peasant with sort of, sowing and ploughing and toiling in a field.
I'd rather be a random person in Australia today than a random person in any other country in the world.
Correct.
And I am well aware of the flaws of my country.
Yeah.
And yet still, because more than one thing can be true.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like a relationship. I mean, no one thinks that their partner is perfect, but they, there's clearly some worse alternatives out there.
We're sold this idea that happiness is achieved by buying shit. What have you found to be a sustainable source of happiness that we can go and access should we need it?
Again, is being slightly cheesy, but I think living through others more than through yourself. I think having children has been great for me. Their joy becomes my joy. I was getting slightly bored with the story of Eamon. I thought, okay, this, and suddenly there's a whole new sort of volume that I can read instead. And I'm just one of those people who just sort of observes life more than I sort of throw myself into it. I'm not deeply sort of emotional, but I'm sort of more governed by thoughts than feelings a lot of the time. But when I feel love for people or animals and see them feel joy, it travels down a direct tube to my brain and my heart.
There's a tube? Amazing. I've got to get back on my...
The metaphor fell down at the end there, but
I'm interested in protecting this tube at all costs.
Happiness tubes, Asha. It's a $1 million business idea.
Let's go. Mate, it's been great to chat to you. Thanks for taking it. Thanks for writing this book. It's been good to talk about this stuff with you today.
Champion. Thanks, mate.